The number the supermarkets are hoping you never add up. There's a number doing the rounds in British farming circles this week. It's not from a rival business. It's not a tabloid invention. It came straight from Jeremy Clarkson's own accountant, spoken out loud, on camera, in the newest season of his show. The number is minus 8,486 pounds. At first glance, that's just red ink. A loss. The kind of figure a competitor would screenshot and laugh about. But once you understand what that number is actually measuring, it stops looking like failure and starts looking like something else entirely, a line in the sand. Because that loss is Clarkson doing, deliberately, with his own money, the one thing no British supermarket has been willing to do in 3 decades. And the reason the big chain should be uneasy isn't that he's losing money. It's why he's losing it. For a couple of years now, the headline version of the story has been simple: Clarkson versus the supermarkets. The farmer who cut out the middleman, sold his own beef, paid British farmers properly, while the chains kept squeezing them for another halfpenny a litre. That version is true. But it's a trailer, not the film. The real story is stranger, darker, and considerably more impressive, because it's a story of a man who looked at a business bleeding money and decided that loss was the most honest thing he'd ever put on television. So today, we're doing the thing the viral clips never bother with. We're going through the actual numbers, what the beef costs, what it owns, and exactly how much Clarkson is willing to sacrifice to keep a promise. By the end of this, you'll understand how a man losing $8,000 on a country pub is quietly beating an entire industry that prints profit by the laurel load. Let's start where the anger began, the wound everything grew from. In year 1 of the farm, Clarkson grew 16 tons of potatoes, properly grown, months of graft, the whole exhausting business of it. And the supermarkets wouldn't touch them. 16 tons was too small a quantity for a major buyer to bother with, and far too much for a roadside honesty box to shift. So the potatoes sat in a shed, and rutted. On camera, in real time, Clarkson learned the lesson every British farmer already carries in their bones. The system isn't designed to pay you what your food is worth. It's designed to pay the least it can possibly get away with, and to make you feel grateful for the privilege. That's the wound the whole project grew out of. The rotting potatoes. The dairy farmer paid pennies, not pounds, pennies, less than the price of a corner shop sweet, for a litre of milk that sits on a supermarket shelf for well over £1. A slow, grinding theft that's been going on for decades, mostly unremarked upon. And here's the part the industry genuinely didn't see coming. When audiences watched that unfold on screen, they didn't just sympathize. They got angry. Not mild, armchair concern. The kind of anger that puts people in a car for 90 minutes so they can spend 50 quid on a candle and a jar of honey, just to feel like they'd struck a blow for the right side. That anger became the foundation for everything that followed. Because Clarkson didn't waste it, he turned it into a promise. Not a marketing slogan. An actual, costly promise with rules attached. He'd raise his own beef, pork, and lamb. Sell it directly to the public. And when he opened the Farmer's Dog Pub in August 2024, an old windmill boozer bought for under £1 million and rebuilt from the ground up, he held himself to a standard no British supermarket would ever dare commit to in writing. 100% British. Not mostly. Not British where possible. Everything on the plate: beef, pork, lamb, vegetables, the beer, the spirits, even the cooking oil. No Coca-Cola. No avocados. No imported black pepper. If it wasn't grown or reared on British soil, it didn't come through the door. No exceptions. No quiet substitutions when nobody's checking. Away from the cameras, a Michelin-starred chef reportedly called it one of the most genuinely committed supply chains he'd ever seen. And the public backed it with their feet. Queues stretching for hours on opening day, a 360-space car park hastily built in a neighboring field just to cope with demand, and over 140 people employed from day one. People drove in from Birmingham, from London, from further afield, just to stand on the actual farm and eat the actual food. But a promise like that, everything British, no exceptions, no matter the cost, is brutally expensive to keep. And what a person does once the bill for that promise arrives is exactly where you find out whether their principles are real or just good PR. The number on the spreadsheet. In the newest season, there's a scene where Clarkson sits across from Charlie Ireland. his accountant, the show's resident voice of financial gravity, whose entire job seems to be walking into a room full of Clarkson's optimism and quietly taking it apart with a spreadsheet. In this episode, Charlie runs the numbers on the farmer's dog, the one physical place where the famous diddly squat beef and pork actually reach paying customers. The figure Clarkson reads off the page: profit before taxation, minus £8,486. The pub is losing money. Here's where the story actually turns. A different kind of business owner buries that number, quietly raises prices, swaps in cheaper imported filler nobody at table 9 will ever notice, protects the margin, shields the brand, makes sure that number never sees daylight. That's a supermarket playbook. Protect the margin at the farmer's expense, then print "We proudly support British farmers" on the front window. Clarkson did the opposite. He let the cameras roll while his own business told him it was bleeding money, handing his critics ammunition they'd been begging for. Why? Because the loss is the truth, and the entire point of the exercise was to stop lying to people about food. And once you understand why the pub loses money, it stops looking like a failure and starts looking like the price of integrity, itemized. The pub is book solid every single day. That's a triumph, and also the source of most of its costs. Consider £47,000 a month just on parking attendants, not chefs, not waiters, not beef, people standing on a country lane, managing traffic, because demand became a genuine road safety issue. Roughly 400 pint glasses disappearing every week, alongside £200 worth of stolen cooking oil, light bulbs, even the urinal traps that and electricity supply is so overwhelmed that a full grid upgrade has been quoted at £200,000, with a generator running at roughly £100 a day in the meantime just to keep the lights on. A 6,000-litre water tank that refills overnight and still runs dry most days, because demand never lets up. This isn't the picture of someone who's bad at business. It's the picture of someone absorbing every cost the modern world can throw at him rather than break the one promise he made about where the food comes from. Then there's a line that should genuinely worry every supermarket executive in the country. Clarkson has said, in his own column and echoed on the show, that for every customer who sits down and eats, he loses somewhere around £10. His framing wasn't a complaint. It was closer to a plea. Your lunch cost me a lot more than it cost you, so please be decent to my staff. Think about that for a second. That's not someone hiding a loss. That's someone standing directly in front of it, pointing, and saying, "This is what doing it properly actually costs, and I'm paying it anyway, because the alternative is doing what they do, and I won't." The trap the headlines walked into. When the numbers went public, the press reached for the easiest possible angle. Too expensive. A rip-off. £24 for a roast, £26 with beef and pork together, £14 for 2 pints, a tenner for a glass of wine, a 12% service charge on top. Every outlet landed on the same word: expensive. And in doing so, nearly all of them walked straight into a trap, because the facts say the opposite. Clarkson, characteristically, had done his homework. He compared prices with other pubs in the area and came out cheaper than most of them. His example: a chicken liver parfait with sourdough, priced at £9.50, against a local average closer to £12.50, and around £15 at a nearby award-winning gastropub. Sit with that contradiction, because it shouldn't be possible. The pub is losing money, and it's charging less than its rivals. A business bleeding cash is supposed to raise prices to stop the bleeding, and Charlie the accountant suggested exactly that. Clarkson's answer was simple. He's already cheaper than the pubs around him, and is not going to gouge the people queuing down his lane to fix a problem they didn't create. So how do you undercut your competitors on price and still lose £10 a head? There's really one answer, and it's the whole engine of this story: the old British rule. Clarkson has said sourcing British black pepper alone costs roughly 10 times more than simply importing it, like everyone else does. British beef and bacon from his own farm, he can more or less make the numbers work on. But insisting every single ingredient be British, in a global food system engineered to make the imported version cheaper at every turn, means is paying premium prices going in while deliberately holding the price down going out, and personally covering the gap in the middle. Supermarkets never have to absorb that gap. They source from wherever on the planet is cheapest, every ingredient, every time, and quietly pocket the difference between what it costs them and what they charge you. That difference is essentially their whole business model. Clarkson looked at that same gap and refused to take it. The machine behind the loss. So here's a question the cheap shot headlines never get around to asking. If the beef genuinely loses money on every single plate, how does any of this keep running? How do you absorb a pound 10A head loss and not simply collapse by Christmas? This is where you realize what Clarkson actually built, and it's far cleverer than a pub. He never bet the whole operation on the beef turning a profit. He built an ecosystem, a machine where every part feeds every other part, so one piece is allowed to run at a deliberate, principled loss because the rest of the engine carries it. Start with the engine itself. Amazon reportedly paid Clarkson somewhere around £160 million across a 3-season deal, and the show became one of Prime Video's most watched UK originals. That's not beef money. That's not pub money. That's platform money. And here's the part almost everyone misses. Every loss-making, stubborn, principle-driven decision Clarkson makes becomes a content that funds the next one. Every tense meeting with Charlie, every "we're losing money," every fight to keep an ingredient British when the imported version is 10 times cheaper. That's not just a cost. That's footage. That's the show. And the show is worth more than any margin a supermarket has ever squeezed out of a struggling dairy farmer. Supermarkets spend hundreds of millions a year on advertising trying to convince you they care about British farmers. Clarkson gets paid to demonstrate, in granular, unscripted detail, that he actually does. They rent the appearance of virtue. He sells the real thing, and the cameras fund it. From there, the rest of the machine locks into place around that central engine. The farm grows a barley. The barley becomes Holkstone lager. And setting aside the exaggerated rumors floating around online, the real, audited figures are still striking. The brewing company's equity climbed from roughly £432,000 to over £3 million in a single financial year, with sales jumping from £7.8 million to £21.3 million. The beer sells in the pub. The pub serves the beef. The farm shop sells both to the people who drove 2 hours to be there. The show advertises every link in that chain to millions of viewers at once, and every person who visits becomes a walking advertisement for the next link. That's why the beef is allowed to lose. It was never meant to be a standalone business that had to justify itself on a spreadsheet. It's a heart of something much bigger. And a heart doesn't have to turn a profit. It just has to be real. As long as the beef is genuinely British, genuinely fair to the farmer, and genuinely good, it does its job. It makes the whole story true. And a true story, in the right hands, is worth more than money. That's the one thing the supermarkets can't replicate, no matter how big they get. They can match his scale, undercut his prices without blinking. What they can never manufacture is a person the public has watched and trusted for 2 decades, someone who'd rather lose £10 a plate than serve a single lie about where dinner came from. You can't buy that with a media plan. You can't build it in a boardroom. It only gets built the slow, expensive, stubborn way, by actually meaning it. So, did he actually win? Here's the honest answer, and it depends entirely on what you think the game was. If the only game that counts is margin, squeeze a farmer as hard as possible, source the cheapest ingredient available anywhere on earth, charge whatever the market will bear, and pocket the difference, then no, Clarkson isn't winning that game. He's not even playing it. He's actively refusing to, losing money on every animal on purpose, and telling millions of people so on national television. But that was never the real game. That was their game, the one they wrote the rules for. The game Clarkson actually chose is trust. And on that scoreboard, it isn't remotely close. Think about what the supermarket started with: the land, the capital, the distribution networks, the data, 3 decades of every conceivable structural advantage. And they spent nearly all of it learning how to pay a farmer a few pence for a litre of milk and call it a good quarter. Clarkson walked in with a camera crew, a short temper, an increasingly serious grasp of actual farming, and a flat refusal to compromise on where the food came from, and built something that feels more genuine to the British public than anything that's ever come off a supermarket distribution line. He didn't beat them at their own game. He exposed it. He got an entire country to flip the packet over and read the ingredients instead of trusting the flag printed on the front. He proved, with his own bank account as the evidence, that you can pay farmers fairly, keep everything British, and still charge customers a fair price, provided you're willing to lose money to mean it. The supermarkets will never be willing to do that. Not for 1 quarter. That's the entire gap between them and him, and he just lit it up for everyone to see. The part that should actually worry them. Here's what should keep a supermarket boardroom up at night, and it isn't the $8,000. They lose more than that down the back of the sofa. What should terrify them is a proof of concept. For decades, the entire industry rested on one quiet assumption, that the British public didn't really care where their food came from. Not enough to pay more for it. Not enough to change their shopping habits. Cheap and convenient wins every time. End of discussion. That assumption was a business model. Clarkson just took a sledgehammer to it on national television and let everyone watch the cracks spread. Because look at what the loss actually proves. People are driving for hours, queuing down a country lane in the cold, booking weeks ahead, paying serious money, happily, for food whose entire selling point is that it's British and the farmer got paid properly for it. Demand is so overwhelming it costs £47,000 a month just to manage the parking. That's not the behavior of a public that doesn't care. That's a market the industry swore for 30 years didn't exist, standing in a muddy Oxfordshire field with its wallet out. And every farmer in the country is watching. Every one of them now has living, film proof that there's another way, that you don't have to accept a few pennies a litre, that you don't have to grovel to a supermarket buyer holding all the cards. Go direct. Tell people the truth about your food, and the public will back you. Clarkson didn't write a strongly worded letter to a supermarket buyer. He didn't form a committee. He built the thing, absorbed the loss, filmed every uncomfortable minute of it, and in doing so handed every farmer in Britain both a blueprint and a reason to believe it could actually wake. That's the real threat. Not one pub's red ink, but the now widely broadcast idea that the supermarket's 30-year grip on British food was never as unbreakable as they spent 30 years insisting it was. Clarkson just showed the country the door was unlocked the whole time. And once people know a door opens, you can't make them forget it. Back where we started. Minus £8,486. Clarkson's own number, off his own books, read aloud on his own show. A supermarket would have buried that figure so deep you'd need a digger to find it. Clarkson broadcast it to millions, because that loss is a proof. Proof that he'd rather lose money than break a promise about British food. Proof that the public will queue around the block to back someone who actually expensively means it. And proof that an industry that spent 30 years squeezing farmers for another halfpenny was beatable all along, just not on price. Never on price. On the one thing they can never fake. So here's a question for the comments. Is Jeremy Clarkson doing more for British farming than 30 years of governments and supermarkets combined, even while losing money on every cow that walks through his kitchen? Because from where we're sitting, a man willing to lose £8,000 and 10 quid a plate to keep his word just made every "We proudly support British farmers" poster in every supermarket window look exactly like what it always quietly was. And next time you're standing in the supermarket aisle with a pack of beef in your hand, are you going to check the back of the label now? Not the flag on the front. The actual label. Because once you've seen how it really gets made, and who pays for it, and who refuses to, you can't unsee it. Drop your answer below. I read every single comment. And if you enjoyed this one, step into the vault for more. Hit subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.